Hi, this is Steve Addison, and you're listening to the Movements Podcast, the podcast for people who want to multiply disciples and churches everywhere. Today, we're still in lockdown, so we'll be talking to Austin Wilson and Jack Worthington about multiplying disciples and churches online.
So, 12 years ago, I actually started a church in my home. And the reason that I did that is I was in the Army, just newly married, and could not just find a church that I could really get involved in, or that was really preaching the word of God, I felt at the time. Okay. So my wife and I had some friends, and they were all feeling similarly, some brothers and sisters, and we ended up just saying, hey, why don't we meet in our homes, and the man in the house brings something. And we just rotated homes, and we were all young couples with one or two kids, and it was amazing. We grew exponentially. And what's crazy about that is I never really went back to the Legacy Church model, and even though I have nothing against it, and God, just never directed me to it again. So I'm in the military, and in the military, United States military, you travel around every couple of years to different Army bases, and you're stationed in different places. And so I ended up going to a college where I was an instructor while in the military. And when I got to this college, I had never really discipled people kind of one-on-one or in smaller, close-knit groups, except for, in church where there's discipleship that happens in a small church in a home. But, I got these college kids, and I was married now with two kids, and I just fell in love with discipling these young men and women, and with my wife. And so I just really learned to show people who Jesus is and how to really follow him in the military, and how to share the gospel. Now, the problem was I was doing that mostly on my own, in that I was discipling people, and I was following Jesus and obeying him, but I was not really discipling them so that they could disciple others. Now, more is caught than taught. So, a lot of these guys, even though I never really taught them explicitly, like, they're still doing some of the things that I was doing. In fact, some of those guys have churches in their homes, and they're multiplying disciples in churches right now. But I think that was the biggest thing that happened, was that I had a church in my home that ended up getting very big, and I realized that God was actually calling me to get out of the Army and stay at this college and continue to do ministry there. And so I did that. It was a crazy, crazy story of God just telling me to do crazy things, and with 4 kids, and it's just amazing how he provided along the way. And I didn't even realize the strategicness of what he was doing at the time, but just trying to follow him the best I knew how. But also at the time, I didn't have a lot of discipleship in my own life. I didn't have somebody pouring into me, but I was following Jesus the best I knew how, and in his word, and trying to disciple others the best I knew how. So the church in my house got so big, I realized, God, they're all coming to hear me. I was doing a church in my home kind of traditionally. I was kind of preaching a sermon, and that's all I knew. And I was, we're doing music, but then I realized, man, we got to either get a bigger building or we got to do something else. And I had heard through the Army grapevine of some people that were talking about multiplication of churches and things. And I brought some of the leaders in that church together, and we ended up praying, and we asked God what we should do with the amount of people we had in our small little home. And we ended up splitting that church into 3 churches, and 2 of those leaders each took a church, and we decided we're all going to meet at the same time, and make everybody choose which church they want to go to. So we kind of amoebaed the church, if you will. And we learned so much through that. But what's really funny about it is Chuck Wood heard that had happened through the Army grapevine, because Chuck was in the Army a while ago. He heard about that, and he actually called me. He called me up. I had met him like once or twice before, but didn't know him very well. But he called me and he said, "Hey, I'd like to come do a training with you." And I've told him this, and when I heard that, I was like, "I don't need training. Like, what are you talking about? Like, do a training with me?" Like, I just didn't know what was going on at the time. And so I gave him, I remember sitting, I was actually doing a military training because I'm still in the reserves. And I remember sitting in the back of this vehicle, this Army vehicle, and talking on the phone with him, and just thinking, I'll just give him a date way out in the future and maybe he'll forget about it. So I was talking to him in like August, and I literally gave him the date of next April. Like that. I was like, maybe next April will be a good time. So, sure enough, he kept the date, and he ended up still coming, and he came with Jim McKnight and some others. And that's when they showed me 411. They showed me some things about, small churches. But I think the biggest thing that I just realized is, man, I was discipling people to be dependent on me instead of discipling them to be able to disciple others and be dependent on Jesus and not need me at some point. Interesting. Right after that, I actually left some ministries that I was a part of that I was really helping and I loved and I'm so thankful for. But I was just like, I need to start over. And these other ministries weren't really willing to shift the paradigm a little bit. And so I said, hey, I'll give you all the people I've been discipling and whatever. I will start over. I'm going to go to the lost. I'm going to start churches and discipling people from among the lost. And so 4 years ago, almost exactly, this happened. And I had 2 people in my whole ministry at that point. And I just started doing, small church with simple biblical reproducing tools that really, has grown into an amazing network of that God has done.
And are you seeing new believers come out of that network?
Yes. And that's what we really encourage everybody to do. Like, hey, if you've got this vision to see no place left here at this college and in our state, in our country, don't go after believers that already have churches. Let's go after the lost. Let's not sheep shift, right? Let's not invite a whole bunch of people to our churches from believers that already have places to go. Let's go after the lost and disciple them and see them come to the kingdom, disciple them and plant churches from among them. So yeah, we saw this really start to now, the first year was a little slow, second year a little slow, and then the third year is when it really started to take off, to where, there was things happening that I didn't even know about.
And so what's the spread? I mean, any idea how many churches or how many people are gathering?
Right. Yeah. So right now, the number isn't exact. I was actually trying to count it up before this call, but it's around 40 churches right now, that are active and discipling others. So Jack was a student in the college that I was teaching at and where I do my ministry now and where I'm based here in New York. And one day, me and 2 of the guys that was in our church, but we do additional discipleship outside of church for leaders, and we call them A teams and our accountability teams. And whenever we do accountability teams, we are always looking to maximize time. And I'm a firm. As I look at Jesus, it is not possible to do discipleship like Jesus does it unless we're in the harvest with those we're discipling. And That's his example. And so every time we're together, we try to share the gospel together. And so we were in this cafeteria, and Jack was on crutches. And one of the students that was with me said, "Hey, I know that kid. He's on crutches. Let's go pray for him." That's one of our, we want to demonstrate the kingdom of God as well as proclaim it. And so we always try to pray for people and pray for healing. And so we went over and we asked Jack if we could pray for him. And he was like, "Yeah, I guess." You could tell he was like, "This is kind of weird. This is kind of weird." And we grabbed his food for him. He was getting some lunch, or I don't even know if it was lunch. It was probably like dinner or something. And we said, "Hey, you want to come to our table and talk with us a little bit?" And we were able to share the gospel with him for a long while. Now, he didn't receive the gospel at that moment, but he was at a very low point in his life and was like, "Wow, this is really interesting." But, the next thing that we like to do with somebody who's a yellow light, right, somebody who doesn't reject the gospel, doesn't necessarily receive it completely, but says, "Hey, I'd like to learn more." One of the students offered, "Hey, Jack, I'll meet up with you at breakfast and we can read the Bible together and talk about it. And you can get introduced to Jesus. You can get to know who Jesus is before you give him your life."
Jack, what was going on in your life at that time?
Yeah, well, so it was interesting. There was a lot of combination of things coming together. I was one of those people who was raised or just had the mentality that I wanted to really be accomplished and achieved. And it was interesting. I got to this point, this cycle of realizing that everything I was pursuing in this world wasn't bringing me the joy or fulfillment I was looking for. And I got to this really burnt out or restless stage. And then also I had a misconduct or disciplinary board while I was at the academy, and I tore my meniscus and had surgery. So a lot of things were happening, and I was just really at a low point. And so, of course, God's timing is always perfect. So when I was going to get some food, a couple of my classmates who were meeting with Austin saw me, noticed me, and asked to pray for me. And I remember it was pretty awkward for me, like most people who know what's going on in that sense. But it was at the right time. And I remember as they shared with me how Jesus had changed their life and just the gospel, just in full picture, I didn't believe right away, but I wanted to. And yeah, after just 2 weeks of meeting with classmate Nick of mine and really testing to see, is this really true? I came to realize the truth that it is. And I gave my life to the Lord, and everything has changed since then. Even before all that stuff began to happen, that joy, that fulfillment I was always looking for, I now have. And once I gave my life to Christ, and that's been about 2.5 years almost since then.
And what's happened since then?
Yeah, so from everything that happened, God pulled me out of the academy a few months after I gave my life to him. And since then, he has been sending me around to a lot of different places. I feel he's put a call on my life to just live a missionary life. And he's led me to India and Africa, but most of my time I spent back at West Point again, but not as a student, as a disciple, just growing and learning from Austin and from those in that network and my past classmates, and just really learning to see what it's like to walk with the Lord and be a disciple maker.
So what are you learning about how to continue on and even build momentum in the ministry that God's given you?
When I first learned about the vision of No Place Left and just saw these biblical principles, I also realized I'd never really gotten discipleship, and Jim McKnight actually asked or offered to start to be to disciple me. And so I ended up saying, yeah, I'd like that. That'd be good. I've never had anybody in my life really discipling me. And So we actually started meeting online because he actually lived in Georgia and I was in New York. So 4 years ago, we started meeting online, and we have been doing that every other week for the last 4 years. And so, I've really been discipled mostly by an online church that Jim leads. And through that church, there's a church in my home that is full of a bunch of leaders that are leading churches right now. And then I'm also leading 2 online churches, one for the Northeast and one that I just started up during this COVID thing for a lot of people that were interested in learning how to lead churches. There's some legacy pastors on that and some others. So I have a couple legacy pastors that I'm training in my online churches, and one of them was actually on the cusp of really starting churches in homes out of his legacy church. And then this COVID-19 thing hit, and it has catapulted his whole church into doing, online churches and churches, which will help him to be able to do churches in homes. But man, right now is just the perfect time for pastors, legacy pastors across the world to try some of this out and to, experiment with discipling, people online and through small churches. So my recommendation, and this is what's happening right now, is you have leaders in your church as a legacy pastor, right? You have some guys that are just passionate about Jesus, passionate about serving the church, and man, bring those guys, those leaders that you have, bring them into a church with you. Start discipling them in an online church or in a church in your home if you can, and start showing them what this can look like, and then encourage them to start gathering the other people they know in the churches that aren't necessarily leaders yet to start going to their churches. And so, pastor has a church in his home with his leaders, and then those leaders are gathering up people throughout the church and starting up, the micro churches, these small churches, these online churches with the other people in the congregation. And, eventually this pastor could actually just be discipling a few, where then his leaders are then discipling a few, and those leaders are, and then those people are discipling a few, and it can reach the whole church, and everybody's getting discipled from the pastor down. That's what I recommend. And then, for large gatherings, maybe once COVID is up, what we do is we have a weekly worship and prayer gathering. So everybody in the churches is invited. We do an acoustic set. We have a little place we can go to, whether we have 4 people or 40 people, or more, 4 people or 80 people. It's an amazing time because we're worshiping and praying. We don't have to go through a huge ordeal of setting up and tearing down and, the program and all this. It's just been amazing. And so that's what I encourage legacy pastors. Hey, first you got to be the example. So show your leaders how to do it, disciple them, and then encourage them to disciple others in the church. And then start gearing your Sunday morning big gathering towards more prayer and worship, less preaching, more prayer and worship, maybe just vision casting, and then encourage everybody to really get the discipleship and the meat of the word in the micro churches is just my advice for legacy pastors. And we're seeing it happen right now. I would say online church is about, 80 to 90% solution, right? In some ways, online church is a little bit easier. You can break out people and bring them in real quickly, and you don't have, you can mute, and, you can mute the kids out a little bit, and you can, so sometimes online church doesn't actually give you all the nuances and the skills you need to actually have a church in your home. But you can still learn some key, methods and principles that can carry on whether you're online or physically together in a home.
So one thing I've learned with this online ministry is you can start it at any time. So like I said before, when I was explaining my story, I was moving around so much. And so I created this belief in my mind that couldn't start a church. I couldn't disciple people because I'm moving around too much. And it was funny, actually, just about 2 weeks before I went to Africa, I decided, you know what, these people I know who I'm trying to, talk with over the phone, I'm just going to try to start an online church and see how it goes. And right now, so like I said, moving around, a lot of times people college age or after college age, they move around to different areas. And so my sister's in Colorado, my dad in Texas, a girlfriend in New York, a friend in Pennsylvania, another friend in California that I reached out with again, who was in my elementary school with me, a friend in Florida, and another one in Nashville. Like there's so many people that moved around in different areas that this has just created an opportunity to continue that discipleship, that structure and training, regardless of where you go. When you change your area, you don't have to leave everything behind. And if you're moving around, you don't have to worry about not or letting go of what you've built or the relationships you've had. I can go anywhere. When I was in Africa, we still met online. We still had A teams while I was there. While everyone was back in the States. With this online churches, anyone can do it anywhere. I thought that online church would be, a resource like helpful with a movement in person, but I've begun to see that you can actually just have a movement of online churches. Out of this, my sister now, she's been meeting with some people and started an online church now. And the guy in Florida, he shared with his girlfriend, and he's realizing he's going to bring his friends together and meet with them online during this time. And it's just really interesting seeing that, and also like learning to grow in that obedience. One of my friends here, when we started this online church, he would always make a goal. He's like, I'm going to read one chapter this week. I swear. Like, I'm going to read a chapter this week. And when I come back, you guys, I'll have it in week after week after week. Be like, all right, Chris, did you read the chapter? And he goes, no, I'll do it. I swear. And now, about 5 months later, he's like reading 10 chapters a day. He's just on fire, spend time with the Lord, sharing with his friends, trying to meet with them online. Hasn't gotten there yet, but he is just really doing it. And that has all happened through online communication, online church. And it's just been really cool to see a lot of different people grow in that as well. With, my sister, I after I gave my life to the Lord, I only communicated with her online. And then the one time I saw her is when she decided to give her life to the Lord and was able to baptize her, which was awesome. The hardest thing to do is invite people onto the group, figure out a time where everyone's free. And then once you do that, you just kind of follow what I've learned, the 3/3 structure of the discipleship, looking back, looking up, and looking ahead. We found that we don't sing songs, worship songs during that phase. We praise God and prayer and pray for each other. But other than that, it's just been continuous. It's been great. The one thing that I found that is difficult is leadership development of modeling for people and assisting them with like sharing the gospel. A lot of people, as you begin to talk and practice with each other on sharing online, we're able to build the confidence, but you're not able to be there with them, share the gospel with them. However, those that you've already done that with, by meeting online and talking about it and keeping each other accountable, they continue on with that. So the one thing we found, it seems like everything works well, is continued on. You're not able to meet in person, so there's some part of that separation. We're still able to see each other and talk. But the one thing that is a little difficult is the beginning step of modeling, sharing, and assisting in that. But once that has already been done, then there's really no negative that I've come across.
It's funny when this whole COVID thing hit. I mean, not much has changed for me. I would say, one of the things that we usually do when everyone's not quarantined and still kind of has busy lives, we actually do a lot of online churches every other week. I found that to actually be a really good rhythm especially as you got a bunch of leaders that are doing a lot of things downstream. It's been a great rhythm to still invest in them, disciple them, but also be able to let them run. And we have a model that we really like to use for multiplication in our networks, and that is be in a church where you're getting trained, and then be in a church where you're training others, and do those at separate times so that, obviously you can get discipleship and you can learn from the other people in that training church that you're getting trained in, and then disciple others. And what's amazing about that is it doesn't break up the family, right? Sometimes we don't know how to multiply because we don't want to stop going to this church. This is our church, right? But if you stay in that church and then you go and you start a new church with your oikos and with the people that you know in your relational network, then you can effectively keep the family together, continue to get encouragement and strengthening and training while still discipling others. And if you teach them to do the same, there's an amazing connection down the line that really allows for quick multiplication, quick releasing of authority, while still being able to get training and encouragement. Anyway, college ministry has always had a very robust mission-oriented focus. I shouldn't say always, but a lot of college ministries do, right? But I have not been able to locate a college ministry that has a good way of continuing to be in contact and encouraging college students after they graduate, and to see if they continue to be fruitful, if they continue to do the things that they learned in college. And that's what, I'm so excited about. That's what we're seeing now. We have, on the college campus here, we have students leading churches, and they are learning to share the gospel, disciple people, and plant churches and multiply them while they're a student in college, while they have the tightest oikos they'll ever have, right? While they don't have a lot of other responsibilities except for class. And they're so teachable, they're available. You have to teach them some faithfulness. But if they're willing to sow seed, we call it fast. If someone's faithful, available, seed sower, and teachable, then just disciple them. And now with online, I have so many students that have gone out that, sometimes may get isolated, don't have a lot of encouragement, especially in the military context. And they are still planning, they're sharing the gospel with their units. They're leading people to Jesus, baptizing them, and starting to disciple them in churches and planting churches all over the place while being able to stay connected online. And so we're seeing finally, I'm seeing for the first time guys that labor in college continue to labor when they leave college. And man, if we could raise up a generation of young men and women that know how to labor in college and continue to labor for the rest of their life, just imagine the impact that can have globally. Right. And Jack has, led his sister to the Lord, just baptized her recently. His dad is in his church. His dad is close to coming into the kingdom. So close. And it's amazing to see, college is also just an amazing sending base, right? Like you get to disciple guys for 4 years, hopefully, and they leave and will go to the workplace and will go back to places you'd never be able to go and bring the gospel there. And they already know how to disciple those who believe. So really, really incredible, just asset we have in online church to be able to continue to disciple and support those guys and gals as they go out.